Hey everyone, this is Mike, and today I'm going to be talking about AoEs that you should stand in. From the very beginning of the game, they've always been teaching you that whenever there's an AoE on the floor, you should always try to avoid it as to not take damage from the damaging spell of the enemy that it is attached towards. But there are also a lot of skills in this game that are friendly AoEs coming from your healers or from your other DPS jobs and even your tanks in the case of Dark Knight that will be beneficial for your team. When it comes down to your healers, it's usually about receiving heals from them or a damage reduction effect, and when it comes down to your DPS skills, that will usually be puddles on the floor that will deal damage to the enemies. So you want to make sure that if you are playing the tank, that you drag those enemies inside of that AoE and not run away from the AoE in case you think that it might be damaging for you. So in today's video, I'm just going to quickly go over all of these skills that are beneficial that you will most likely want to be standing in, or in the case of you playing tank, that you want to drag the enemies into, so that you basically get some extra damage out of that skill as well. Now, first thing that we need to do in order to make sure that you can see these AoEs as well is go into your character settings and make sure that your party effects are set to at least limited. I know that Final Fantasy XIV has a lot of different spell effects going on at the same time most of the time, and sometimes that might just be too much, so you want to turn that off. And I personally have that done myself as well, but when it comes down to your party effects, you want to set those to limited because that still allows you to see these friendly AoEs that you will want to stand in. So make sure that you have that option enabled, because otherwise you won't be seeing any of these in the first place, or of course if you're showing all of your friendly effects, then you will see these as well. So let's start with our healers, because I feel like these are usually the most important ones. For Scholar we have Sacred Soil. This is going to be a very big damage reduction field for as long as you're standing inside of it, and it will also grant you a heal over time, so it's a 2-in-1. You take less damage while you're standing inside of it, and then you also are being healed as long as you stand inside of it as well. This is really great for whenever there's a raid-wide AoE coming, so you make sure you're standing inside of it before the raid-wide AoE goes out, and then you can just stay a little while longer to then get healed up from the damage that you just took. White Mage has Asylum. This is very similar, it just puts down a bubble. As long as you're standing inside of the bubble, you will receive a regen over time, but on top of this one, you also gain a healing boost. So as long as not a lot of healing is necessary, you just stand inside of it and you gain healing, but whenever there is more healing needed, this will also give all of the healers a healing boost to make it easier to keep everyone alive, in case you're like on some kind of a soft enrage like on E12 Savage, will be very useful for that. Astrologian has two of them. We have Earthly Star. This is something that is placed on the floor, and then whenever the Astrologian themselves decide to explode the star, or when the star expires after 20 seconds, it will deal both damage to the enemies and also heal everyone that is inside. So the difference here is that you do not need to stand inside of this AoE for the entire duration, like you want to be doing with Sacred Soil and Asylum from Scholar and White Mage, but you do need to make sure that you're standing inside of it when it explodes, because if you're not in there when it explodes, you're going to be missing out on all of the healing that comes from it. Of course, if you're playing tank, make sure that the enemies are standing inside of this one as well, because it also does some damage. The second ability that we have on Astrologian is Collective Unconsciousness. Now this one will do two things. It will both heal you as well as give you a damage reduction effect, and depending on which of the two stances that Astrologian is in, the effects will be flipped. So if we're in our regen stance, Diurnal, then as long as the bubble is being held open, you will receive damage reduction when you're standing inside of it. If you just quickly step in and out of the bubble, then you will be granted a buff that gives you a regen over time. If they are inside of their shield stance, Nocturnal Sect, then standing inside of the bubble will give you a regen effect, and quickly dipping in and out of the bubble will give you a damage reduction buff that lasts for 15 seconds. So depending on what stance they're in, you're either gonna get a 15-second heal over time or a 15-second damage reduction, and then again, for the bubble being held open, it is either going to give you a regen if you're in the shield stance, or a damage reduction when you're in the regen stance. So let's move over to the AoEs that deal damage. For Ninja we have Doton. This is just a brown puddle on the floor, deals damage over time, very simple over there. Moving over to Dark Knight, we have Salted Earth. Of course, if you are the one playing Dark Knight, you'll most likely be able to control the enemies yourself, unless we're of course talking about 8-man content, or 24-man content, or even 48-man content if we're talking about the Delubrum or Baldesian Arsenal or something like that. But basically, same thing over there, just deals damage over time, drag the enemies inside of it. When it comes down to Summoner, we have 2 of them. The one that you'll see the most often is Slipstream. This is some kind of a green tornado that Garuda does, which again does AoE damage over time. Normal scenarios, you're only going to be seeing this inside of dungeons, or during a boss encounter they should be using Ifrit, so you should not see that over there. But during a dungeon pull, whenever there's a bunch of mobs around, that should be used, so you need to make sure that you keep the enemies inside of there as well if you are playing tank. And an honorable mention over here as well, again, this is something that you normally should not see, but if they do decide to use Titan and they use their ultimate ability Earth and Fury, then Titan will also put a puddle on the floor that deals damage over time. But in general, Titan is not being used in any kind of content. There are some very niche usages for Titan, but in normal gameplay you're not really going to be seeing this, but it is there, so I thought I would mention it. Then we have 2 more, which are kind of, again, honorable mentions as well, because they're not super important, but they can at least help you out or help out the person that is playing said job. So starting off with Dancer, we have Improvisation. This will increase the Esprit gauge for the Dancer, which gives them access to Saber Dance, which is a very strong skill. So as long as you and your team members are standing inside of it, you're basically going to be giving the Dancer more Esprit gauge, so it's very beneficial for them. And then also, whilst you are standing inside of this like kind of dance, I guess you could say, you also gain bonus healing received. So this is great for downtime where nothing is happening and you just need to heal up your party or something to prepare for the boss's ultimate ability. Then this is great to just go stand inside of it. You're giving the Dancer resources and you're also getting more healing received from your healers. And then the last one, this one is very much so out there, but we have the Ley Lines of Black Mage. This one doesn't really do anything for anyone outside of the Black Mage because it will give the Black Mage more attack speed, but it is basically just an AoE that you do not need to be afraid of. Your Black Mage is gonna want to stand inside of it as much as possible because it makes them a lot faster, but outside of that, not really something that you need to be too concerned about. You just don't need to be scared of standing inside of it, but it won't really give you any beneficial effects if you are standing inside of it when you are not the Black Mage that placed the Ley Lines in the first place. But those are basically all the AoEs in the game that you do not need to be afraid of. You can go stand inside of them. For the damaging ones, you want to make sure that if you are playing the tank that you drag the enemies inside of that. Your party members will be very glad that you did that. And then of course, when it comes down to the healing ones, make sure that you stand inside of those because your healer is most likely going to be thinking that you are going to be receiving the heals that they put down and might not heal you outside of that. Or it might just be a last second thing where they're like, oh, they missed my asylum, let me quickly give them a heal because otherwise they might die to the next raid wipe or something like that. Just make sure you stand in those AoEs, your healers will thank you for it. Anyways, that's gonna do it for me, so I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for their support, and I'll see you in the next one.